Welcome back to the ThinkFreight podcast, and thank you so much for joining us today. I've got a really fun conversation with Jam from Rose Rocket. He works in business operations, office of the CTO, and we're diving into the reality of AI adoption in logistics. It's one of those kind of those conversations we see on LinkedIn a lot, and just kind of the overall conversation of freight conferences too. Is just these widely adopted AI, but like, is it really going to solve a lot of the problems that we're seeing today? So, Jam, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you, man. This is going to be a really interesting conversation because, again, AI is just that buzzword that we've heard probably for the last 18 to 24 months, and it's just been in every conversation. And now every company, it doesn't matter what they do, even if they're moving freight, they've got AI in their name now, right? So if they're a freight broker, it's freight broker AI. If they're a carrier, it's carrier AI. Everyone's got their version of AI. Um, but I feel like with everyone having that AI labeled, everything being stamped on it, carriers, brokers, and even freight fraud, we're still struggling with the basics. So why do you think so many tools in logistics are popping up, so fast? And can AI really solve everything for this industry? TMS.ai is the next generation transportation management system from Rose Rocket, one of the most awarded and respected logistics tech companies in North America. Unlike legacy TMS software, TMS.ai is AI native from day one. It's built to help enterprise logistics companies scale without hiring, streamline operations, and automate complex processes from dispatch to invoicing to pricing strategy. With a modular design, TMS.ai lets you build what you need now and add more when the market rebounds. No overcommitment, no bloated contracts, just speed, flexibility, and real ROI. Check out roserocket.com or tms.ai to get started.
100%. So I love the question because it's really two parts, right? Like why is this happening? Why is it so
Yeah.
popular? And is the promise real? So I think the reason why you see so much of it is because we're exploring like incredibly advanced technology that's becoming really accessible because people can talk to the technology. And I think a lot of the providers are trying to see kind of like what the bounds or the limitations of it as it currently is.
Yeah.
And how that happens is you see so many people try to apply it into these different use cases. And like how I think about it is like if so many things are in the wild right now, a lot of them are really in like a proof of concept stage.
Mm.
It's like any net new technology, we're going to get really wacky implementations of things that like, people think are pretty novel and might be trying to solve a problem with like this really new technology. And we'll soon learn from this proof of concept stage what is actually ready for what we, in software development, we call production, like
Yeah.
what's truly ready for like people to use in like the nitty gritty and like true real daily operations. And so in turn, I think the reason why we see this is because we have like incredibly sophisticated new technology that's become really easy to work with. Like people can honestly even test things just by talking to GPT a lot of the times and like see if it can build you something for you if you're really like asking it to solve a problem. And we're gonna soon enough see like what the limitations are as well as like where it's really most useful. I think to answer your other question around like is the promise real really like how much of this really helps, we're starting to see like where the technology is spiky.
Mm.
What I mean by spiky is if I were to think about it, like a lot of the things that you try to do it for, or a lot of the things that we've seen the market try to do it for, so generic agents, um, generic agents, uh, automating the full workflow of an operator, a dispatcher, etc., we're starting to see hit limitations. And the
Mm.
reason why is actually like it's complicated because like the work is complicated. But if you just look at it from a high level, it's very simple. Like a lot of these language models that are the underlying technology. So think like OpenAI. So ChatGPT is like language model, the
Yep.
AI underneath the hood. Think, Anthropic and Claude, which is like the language model of the company Anthropic. Like these are the two biggest ones. And then Gemini from Google. These models are great, but they are only great up until a certain amount. They have like
Right.
these token limits, like the context window, so how much they can actually hear input and then produce output. And so in turn, we're starting to see like a lot of the generic massive workflows have like a hard time getting out of production state. But then specific jobs, again, spiking in specific jobs, we're seeing really tons of value. And so, for example, I think a lot of people are already fully aware of like using ChatGPT or any of these other tools and then softwares that use ChatGPT to produce documents and
Yep.
documentation. That is like a very near solved problem, meaning like you feed it a template and you ask it to spin up a new version. At the current state of the language models, a lot of the softwares that do some really similar job of like policy document, new text content, and then turn it into new policy document, that's solved. It's very spiky, very good at that, better than a person would be because it's able to catch all the minutia.
Hmm.
But then other things, generic jobs, not so much. Very hard for it to infer the right things. Take all the inputs, really all the inputs it really needs to do the same job well that a human would, and do it correctly over and over again. What I mean by correctly over and over again is kind of where the model falls. Like it might give you that magic moment once, and you're like, oh wow, it could kind of do the job. But then you try like the nth time, 10th, 20th, 30th, it will keep failing. And that's kind of like where the limitation is. The models are only so big right now, but they're getting better. And like soon enough, the spikiness will even out.
Do you think, and I have a couple of questions just kind of based on what you said, do you think AI and kind of these tools have maybe become almost too accessible? And what do I mean by that? It's just maybe that everyone, I mean, anyone and their brother can spin up a tool, an AI, a company now backed by AI or with AI. And is it just become maybe almost too accessible for everyone to just be able to do something like this? And secondly, do you think we're maybe going through, and I've heard this from a couple of people, but like an AI bubble, where especially in logistics, where maybe we're trying to throw AI into everything from dispatchers to operations people to the actual truck to putting autonomous level 4 into trucks. So do you think we're going to end up reverting back to maybe a scaled back version of what we are today, or once this technology maybe hits its maybe top point for maybe what we can do with it, what do you think maybe there?
Hmm. It's a great question. I, I think like if I were to give my measured take on it, and then if I were to give my hot take on it, they'd be different things. So what I
Yeah.
mean by this is like, let me give you my measured take. So I don't think it's that accessible yet. Like what I mean by this is like you actually still have to like for it to do good work, even just like I'm talking about like, you using GPT on your own, it actually still requires a lot of manual work to make it produce something good first chance.
Yeah.
A lot of the times you just editing the thing that you want out of like directly is faster than like massaging the outputs of GPT because like you can't control exactly what it edits.
Right.
Where it becomes like scarily accessible is when it's like got like the whole history of all your conversations truly, and like you give it like a 2-word sentence and it's able to spin up exactly what you want based off of like the history of who you are and your interactions, and like that like one specific 2-word sentence that just gave it like a starter, when it's truly like a full person. That's like when it's like
Yeah.
scarily accessible. So I don't think it's like accessible enough yet, because like it like if you really want it to produce something good, and like this is like always like my recommendation for people, like I call it like context, like we call it like context engineering. You have to give it like the who, what, when, why,
Yeah.
right? And then from the who, what, when, whys of the contents of the prompt that you give it, then you give it like the final little bit of things that you want it to do. And then it says something decent. Even then, sometimes you're like reading it and it's like, it's too generic. It's too wordy. It's too verbose. All of these things. The other thing on like the bubble, I think we will get to a saturation point with a lot of the technologies where again, like everything's in POC stage right now. A lot of things are like in to me like a proof of concept environment. And we're starting to see these POCs have to deliver on the promises that the contracts were signed on. So we'll
Yep.
know soon enough like what things are real versus aren't. At the same time, I think like if you like I believe in the concept of like local maximas, right? Like,
Yeah.
and global maximas, like that math concept. Like there's like these curves, but then if you go through the curves, like they're like the curve and like the tip of the curve for where it currently is. But if the global maxima is like the top, I think we might hit a local maxima. And then maybe there's a down curve where like, people are starting to rebound and see kind of like what things are useful, what aren't. And a lot of things will shutter because they're too expensive to maintain. They cost so much just from GPT costs, etc. And then we'll hit like a new local maxima where like, okay, you know what? The models have gotten even better because the models are going to keep getting better. They're going to keep getting better for the next like 5 years at least. Like we haven't, every time we think we see like a decline or maybe like a slowdown, a new model and innovation comes through because the competition is so stiff between the Facebooks, the Googles, etc., the open AIs of the world that something comes up, a new novel improvement comes up, and now all of a sudden the models can go from like 100,000 token limit, meaning 100,000 words basically, to
Yep.
like a million token limit, meaning a million words. Like now we're gonna see the million words to like 2 million, 3 million, and like the models will just get better and better at like understanding stuff. So I think we might be in a bit of a bubble, but I would think of it almost as like local maxima, and maybe
Interesting.
it'll curve down, and then we'll reach a new local maximum that might be even higher as the model gets better, as we learn more about kind of what the limits are. But what the things that are going to endure are going to be things that have like a very clear input output for this current era. What I mean by this is like I talked about earlier about the limitations. For the things that are specific, they will keep showing value. We talked about like
Yep.
document making, like a lot of softwares that are improving like specific policy writing, etc. Like those will do well. Like any of these things that are like really own the market for like clear input equals clear output and has like a clear ROI to it and saves like tons of man hours. I think those are like enduring kind of problems to solve. But then like what will happen is like, okay, now humans will do new work on top of this, and then we have to figure out how do we augment that, and that's
Right.
going to keep being like the challenge.
Rose Rocket is talking to a lot of carriers and brokers every single day. So something that keeps, at least in my mind, coming up, and I've heard this from a lot of other tech providers as well, but sometimes maybe you guys haven't come into this problem, but when maybe you have some clients who come in and say, Jam, we have this AI tool, 3 or 4 AI tools, and we're still in the kind of that same situation we were in before. We're not really feeling any more efficient. Things aren't really moving in the direction. Is that something that you guys are seeing as well, where people are maybe implementing too many tools, maybe all at once, and not really implementing them properly before trying to add and add and add?
That's a great question. I think I think so there's a saying that like a CEO I used to work with like always had that I thought was like really salient. The future exists. It's just a matter of where. And so what kind of he means by it and what I mean by it is kind of like in certain geographies and certain subsets of the ecosystem, they're already living like 5 years ahead, and like the rest of the world is just catching up to them. And I feel like I see this play out quite a bit even within like the trucking space from like my time with Rose Rocket so far. And so in turn, my answer to your question about kind of like how is it happening? It's really different. Some players have like are like primed for success. They understand like how they want to implement it. And to your point, they're very targeted. They're like, we have this very clear problem, and we know this problem is like it's not just like something that like pure like RPA, like robotic process automation softwares could solve because like there's nuance to it, but it's got a clear input and a clear output.
Right.
And so in turn, they see like the opportunity to implement things like AI, and like they'll either like bootstrap something themselves, or of course they'll use software providers such as Rose Rocket to kind of enable. And with Rose Rocket, we're a little bit more of a platform play, so we have a lot more configurability with these advanced applications. And so what that enables is like effectively what's going on is then they'll kind of have this ability to say like we know there's these clear problems. We think this is really suitable for AI because of the fact that how to say like it's not just like pure automations. It requires more flavor, more text consumption, more unstructured data out. And then they see these opportunities and they automate against it. So they're living in the future. They're able to implement these things because they identify the problem. I think when it's like someone's catching up to the technology And to your point, really stretching the limits of it is when there's a little bit of like the risk of like trying too much at once. But I feel like one of the things I've observed with like trucking operators is like this is like something like, so I come from e-commerce. I was that's where I built my previous startup. That's the thing that we sold to Rose Rocket.
Yeah.
And like trucking operators are incredibly like efficient. I am like super impressed by like the operating kind of like minutia and details that most dispatchers hold. Like they
Yeah.
build so many interesting flows just to automate their day-to-day work, and like whatever tools they have available to them, whether it's like Excel, macros, even just like a really complex like Excel sheet that I saw like a 40 truck carrier once use. Like, and so in turn, I think they're like, just given their ability to be really excellent operators, a lot of them are trying to figure out what advantages can AI bring me. And so to your point, like they're trying a lot of stuff.
Yep.
But I'd say a lot of them have like really good rigor. Like the some of the dispatchers we've talked to, some CEOs and VPs of, let's say, like a carrier division or broker division, they know like what passes their quality bar and like which
Yeah.
clear problems they want to solve. So like I'd say a lot of the operators that we work with are like kind of living in the future. They know what problems they want to solve, and like they're able to discern what they would and won't do. But then again, just given like the fact that like a lot of dispatchers, brokers, etc., are such like operating savants, I'd say like there probably are a ton that are kind of like trying too many things at once, but it's probably because they're trying to stretch the limits of it. I think one of the principles that I have for AI usage, and this is coming from myself also as like previously a startup owner and operator,
Hmm.
is I always think about input output. Like if there's a process diagram I can draw and I can concretely say like I know this process in and out, and then I
Yeah.
can like math out like this is like hours long, weeks long, months long, then I will ask myself what parts of this can I automate with AI. So if I were to like leave any sort of message, it would be like to take that same kind of mentality and like how, for example, I'll give you one that we did.
Yeah.
So
Please.
when we were building our startup, like we actually had like government grants we would apply to,
Hmm.
and so you can like I would think of this government grant process as kind of like maybe like when you're onboarding a new carrier, or like you're signing a new client agreement, or maybe even like onboarding a driver if you're a carrier. it's it's got a ton of documentation, it's got a ton of document synthesis, and then a ton of like information that you have to kind of turn into very specific language. Usually it's legal text. For us it was government policy text. I looked at this, and like in the previous years I did this, it would take me roughly 2 months to gather all the requisite information and apply for the funding. And we pay a very expensive fee to a very expensive agency that they can do 80% of the work just to do this exact same thing. Um, for us, like once I was really starting to think about like this automation side, like I looked at this and I said, okay, what do I need? I need to synthesize tons of project updates into like specific milestones, write out these three very specific proposal documents that the government required, and then give them proof with it, like mathed out work done to
Yeah.
justify like the grant that we're applying for. Once I could draw out that diagram, I basically could tell myself, you know what, like most of this I could feed into GPT, ask it to synthesize and turn into a proposal, especially because a lot of this I had trailing documentation for, but it was messy. So many random documents, so many
Yeah.
random project documents, so many random project updates. I fed like I built like two things. One thing just read all the updates and turned it into a spreadsheet. And then that spreadsheet, just like any spreadsheet, I can use formulas on to calculate the hours. And the other thing I built using GPT was to consume all my project updates, and basically just gave it all the updates. Literally fed it to GPT and gave it the document, the previous year's proposal that I wrote. And I said, hey, here's the updates that I have for this year. Please write a proposal in this style for the government. Here's the government's policy name, etc. And it produced it. This was,
Wow.
I probably spent like 2 weeks tweaking all this to try to do it. And I got it done in like roughly 2 weeks. This used to take me 2 months.
Wow.
A one person 2 month exercise became 2 weeks in tweaking and then shipping. And we got the grants. Like it was incredible. And it wrote pretty much what we needed.
I love that. And that goes to show exactly like the real use case in AI and how it can be applied, where you took over 2 months worth of work, and we're able to simplify that down into 2 weeks. So much time savings and for you, but also like money that you could go out and find in other ways. Jam, I want to ask you because I think that I hear this a lot, and it's agentic agents and also just like agents to do it all. So something you touched on, something you said when I mentioned, are we maybe in an AI bubble? Is maybe these problems are maybe a little bit closer to home, and maybe that bubble is maybe a little bit closer to home, and where these points are. But what do you think, and what is Rose Rocket maybe seeing that are some of the day-to-day issues that actually matter, instead of being maybe an AI agent that solves absolutely everything?
100%. It's so funny. Like we at Rose Rocket, like I would say just with the clients that we work with, we really see where the value lays. And so what I mean by this is like there's so much problems in just like data transcription. So like a lot of the work happens in the inbox today for most of trucking. Inbox, WhatsApp messages, etc. And then you have to go through like where you actually have to do where your system is powered, which is like your TMS. And there's like a little bit of like two silos here that you kind of like operate against. For us at Rose Rocket, like a lot of the value that we see is kind of like how do we empower a connection between where you actually work, such as your inbox, your phone, WhatsApp, etc., to where your data lives or has to live for like the sake of your business operations, which is like our Rose Rocket TMS. And we have like a big kind of like opinion that like it needs to be like completely lockstep and in sync. And that's like one of like the new requisites of like a truly futuristic TMS. You know what I mean? Like if you're going to be AI native in the future for this trucking landscape, like you have to just kind of be plugged into where the work actually happens. And so that's a lot of like the work that we think about. The other thing that we see as like a ton of value is kind of like exception management. What I mean by this is like at scale, when your business is humming, can we produce net new insights for you that you would have otherwise had to hire people for, spend time on while you're so busy kind of like running your business yourself?
Yeah.
And so a lot of the things that we see as valuable is like, can we, so for example, we had like our ability to kind of detect like discrepancies between invoices versus what you should have paid. And then like for us, like that's like real dollars, right?
Absolutely.
Can we tell the difference between like what the order run was versus what the actual to be paid amount or to be paid amount was? And then this kind of gives you like the ability to discern, and then for you flag the exception of things where you might be overpaying. And this is kind of like goes back to like another type of value that we think is really uh, kind of critical, but not so obvious, which is like exception management. So much of trucking operations is in like the flow of doing. You're in the day, you're dispatching, you're planning loads, you're actually like coordinating, making sure the truck gets there on time, etc. But can we help you take a step above and see all these things that you should be keeping an eye on from the exceptions level? And then also the things that are like opportunities that maybe you wouldn't have received otherwise. Can we help you find business that you could have won if you responded earlier? Warn you in advance the next time so you can respond fast and win the load. Find your reason why, like maybe like pricing has been a consistent issue with the customer. And so it's really finding you kind of like arbitrage opportunities to win more business or prevent losses. And so it's like both like connecting where you work and then using that as like a source of real data and then finding you insights and exceptions on top of what that data to provide kind of like clear ROI. And like the things that we think about there is like anything that touches money. I think for us, like we're really like orienting around like what things impact the revenue flow of your business, the quote to order life cycle, right? The quote to cash life cycle, and then what things come out of your business and how do we prevent excessive losses. And so that's kind of like the places where we see as like really valuable, make connecting where you actually work to the system that powers your business. And then from there, using that data to then produce insights and exceptions and
Yeah.
like spot these things that would have been really hard for you to manually spot yourself. Cause like you'll be in the flow, like paying, like if you're a broker, like paying your carrier invoice, sometimes it's hard to find all the documentation to know like this is that you're being overcharged. But if we can spot that for you
Yeah.
in advance, all of a sudden we're saving you money.
Yeah, I mean, there's times, Jim, where I was a broker for a long time, and when you're in the flow of it every day, you may not be seeing some of these overarching trends that are popping up on
100%.
VOLs or on order numbers or on, just whatever it may be. If you're moving 50 loads a day, I mean, 40, 50 loads a day, you're probably not going to notice if after 17 or 20 minutes of you not responding to a client, you start to realize you're not getting as many loads. And if you realize, hey, if I responded within 5 or 7 minutes, I can win my or improve my chances of winning that freight by 40 or 50% just because I responded a little bit quicker.
Mhm.
Those aren't trends that you may notice, but something that maybe an AI tool that is native in what you're doing every day would be able to help you extract and help you notice when you're going through those and trying to notice, hey, where can I win more business? Where can I find those points of growing my current accounts versus having to go out there and prospect new business? And I think that's really really beneficial.
100%. And like, I do like, I feel like I've said this a couple of times and I'm not blowing smoke for no reason. I'm being like so sincere here. Like, trucking operators, dispatchers, brokers are like operating savants. Like they're like a lot of the dispatchers I've talked to are machines. Like they're like
They know their
ridiculously
stuff,
good.
man. Yeah, they know
They
their
know their
stuff.
business in and out. So like for us, like it's all been like the way that we've been thinking about it, and like I would say like is like an our approach with AI is like what are things that give them kind of like more operating leverage? You know what I mean? Like again,
Absolutely.
like exception management is one of them. Reducing the flow, improving the flow of information from where you actually work to where the system is another one. All these things that kind of give you like the ability to win more business, do better deals, go faster is kind of like how we've been thinking about it. And like on our end, like I think again, going back to like my earlier anecdote about kind of like working through working through like this big layer of like possibilities with net new technology, like we're still discovering like the upper bounds and limits of the models ourselves as well. Like there's so much to be built here. It is
Yeah.
pretty incredible.
Jim, I want to dive into kind of this moment we're in. We're getting towards the towards Q4 of 2025. We're kind of in this moment where a lot of these AI pilot programs, these enterprise level AI programs too, are wrapping up from last year. What is maybe the big picture you're looking to see as some of those results start to come out, right? I mean, we want to understand how these pilots were used and how maybe these companies were able to maybe find those, like you said, we were talking about those dollars and maybe those ROI. What are you looking forward to the most as those results come out?
100%. I think we'll see, going back to the spikiness of what things are useful, we'll see in like this coming quarter what plays, what areas of logistics have had like let's say like up rounds. So
Yeah.
more a series F, series C, series B fundraises versus which ones haven't. And those will kind of be like another signal of kind of like what things have made from this like proof of concept stage where like people are piloting a lot of things to having actually graduated to these bigger stakes agreements. I think
Yeah.
like, for example, some of the categories that I'm very interested in seeing is kind of how are people handling data automation, so transcription, etc. How are
Yep.
people is there anything that's really solved this kind of like huge issue in like discrepancy management? Uh, have any planning tools really kind of like won the market? Like all of these things are like things that I think we'll start getting like hints at in the coming quarter.
Yeah.
In addition to that, like one of the things I'm really looking forward to seeing is kind of just for the those things that have been big wins, like I'm really curious to see not like sales agreements signed, but rather like renewals or expansions,
Mm,
because that means like we're kind of like saying like these things are like highly proven or more proven out kind of like ventures.
yeah.
I think for example, like we're seeing a lot of things in like the call bot side,
Yep.
right? Like I'm pretty sure we saw like someone raise like another massive round for agentic calling. There's a lot of opportunity here, and I'm really curious to see kind of like what things win the market here, because eventually we're just going to get robots talking to robots, outbound callers talking to inbound callers, and like using
Yep.
that to coordinate loads, and like it's purely transactional. They do like a rate bidding, and then all of a sudden like we have business one, and like what does business look like there? Like how does negotiation work? You know what I mean? Like sure, maybe it's like abiding by policy, but are we leaving money on the table because savvy dispatchers know when to cut because they can see future business versus like robots
Yep.
are just only like abiding by the policy thing that's been uploaded into their prompts, like I'm really curious how those things will play out.
I completely agree with you 100%. I'm also curious, like, have these tools, these pilots that have been going out, have they made these companies more productive overall? And
Mm.
also, secondly, is how has their user who is using the AI responded, right? So if they're in freight and their carrier base is slowly diminishing because they don't want to talk to an AI, well, that's not going to prove as a very useful tool if you're having to utilize more spot market carriers, one and done carriers, because you're utilizing an AI tool. And I see every day on a lot of these, Facebook groups and LinkedIn, that carriers are really pushing back on these AI, tools. And in another way, I've seen too, where they say, hey, if a broker is going to utilize an AI tool, we're going to find an AI tool, and we're going to use, an AI tool to help us negotiate and make the same phone calls. So again, we're going to get to that same point where you said we're going to have AIs talking to AIs, and really it'll be APIs talking to APIs at that point.
Yeah.
And then I saw this is maybe a month or so ago, I saw a video of two outbound call or inbound call or outbound caller, and it after about 30 seconds it realized, oh, we're both AI, and it started talking in a different like language. It was just using like their like API signals and noises, but it was like very different than like the programmed English. So it's like we're going to get to those points a lot more frequently where that happens. But to that point, Jam, we see how frustrating it is, right? When you order DoorDash or Uber Eats and your food comes wrong, and you get the AI agent, and they tell you, sorry, I can give you a $2 refund on my $45 dinner. So again, I'm not sure that we're going to solve every issue with AI, but I'm really excited to see the results. See, again, to your point, where the expansion is, where people are actually saying, is this a good tool for
More
us?
dollars.
Exactly. Are we going to put more dollars? Are we going to sign, out of a trial, a full contract for the next 2 years, 5 years? But I think that's
Yeah.
what we'll see is like, then what is really driving and providing that ROI? Is there anything maybe from your standpoint or your perspective that maybe are three different applications or even use case points, like like we were talking about, like data analysis and things like that are actually delivering true, really good ROI for transportation? What do you think those would be, or what do you know those to be from your time at Rose Rocket?
100%. So when I think about this, like there's a couple of places that we see as like really clear ROI, and it also is kind of like segmented against like who requires it. So
Yeah.
one of them with like data automation, like the more we look at it, the more we're like bullish that this is like the future. And what I mean by this is like there's so much unstructured data that has to get transcribed back into where you work, such as your TMS, so that way your business can run efficiently, including, for example, even just like parsing documents and passing it on along the right rate con to the right order in your system. This is right now incredibly tedious and gets like the problem doesn't get solved with scale. Yes,
Yeah.
people get more savvy with order entry, but order management is still incredibly tedious. And so that's just a scaled issue. And then it creates silos. Like some things live in certain inboxes, and
Yep.
people share group inboxes. They have a distribution list, but then if someone takes it up, takes the email thread, and then they don't CC the group inbox, all of a sudden everything's left in a silo. So it creates like downstream visibility issues. There's We think of this as like a huge RI opportunity, and like we see it like it just scales,
Yeah.
it scales as your business scales, because like the volume, the ROI is per load per email. So if you think about per load per email, there's tons of emails per load, and as your business grows, there's just tons of more loads. So in turn, like we just look at it and we're like, this is like there's clear value here. Like the better you get it, like connecting between the what's happening in an email to what's happening in an order, updating those details, syncing the details, passing along the documents, etc., the more value there is. It just gets better with scale. The other one that we think of as like a compounding win, as like just like looking at it both in the market, like keeping an eye on competitors, as well as like what we're seeing for ourselves, it is exceptions management, and like specific exception management around the quote to cash cycle, meaning whatever you're paying or getting paid, can you spot discrepancies, spot $1, spot lost dollars, spot trends of who? the reason why we think of this as like really there is because there's enough volume, for example, even on the quote side, so meaning like loads that you did and didn't win,
Right.
to tell you something. And like for most part, like operators and trucking are really focused on loads that have been won, and because it's usually the ones that have to get dispatched, right? But then
Yeah.
there's all this insight and like things that have never been won to really figure out like why. And so there's actually a ton of potential dollars on the table here. And looking and like I'll give it to you another way.
Yeah.
Why can't trucking companies operate just like high scale service industries in other environments? Why can't they operate like e-commerce? Why I say this is because in those categories, there's so much retention and lifecycle marketing that happens. And it's all about optimizing for people who didn't buy but entered the funnel.
Mm. Yep.
So in turn, like my question that I beg is like, why can't we do the same in trucking? Like find revenue that is potential and convert it better. Because like there's enough business and potential loads in pipeline, especially just going from like DAT onto and like outbounding to figure out kind of like where's like the next play.
Well, to that point, Jim, I think it's because a lot of times people don't look at that stuff, right? Because it's the boring stuff, right? It's not flashy. It's not going out and landing a brand new customer. It's not the flashy stuff. So, why do you maybe think the flashy stuff gets more attention, but also does this industry maybe undervalue the small repetitive tasks that do eat up so much time every day and solving those issues as well?
100%. I think it's hard because like if I were to talk about going back to a previous analogy about like industries that live in the future,
Right.
just given how loud AI is, we are seeing like the forefront of it in like our general consumption. You go onto LinkedIn, you're seeing like the latest news about ChatGPT, but they're living again 5 years into the future relative to like where we operate out of in like the rest of the real world physical goods management. And so it's really like we get like it's so pervasive to hear about like all the latest technologies from like the frontiers and like the craziest applications of things now, see robotics, etc. And so it's I think that's why like we might get a little more drawn into the flashing things because like they're so much more pervasive and like visible these days versus like again like going back to like living in the future versus living in the now and like optimizing for the now. I'd say like everyone who manages in the real world or the physical goods world, we are 5 years behind from the people who are on the frontier model side. But we see all the stuff that's happening on those innovations, and because like it's there's so much publicity around it right now. I think we are inheriting some of these things though, and it's really causing really good evolution. And I'm seeing like so much good constructive conversation with like a lot of I would say like innovative brokers and carriers in our ecosystem. So like we're
Yeah.
really excited by these conversations to bring in kind of like how we think about the future into this as well, and like bring people along for the journey because we really want to get everyone there too. But again, I think it's because there's so much publicity around like the frontier of the technology these days that it's like pervasive in like everyone's consumption and everyday consumption, even though we live in the physical goods world five
Yeah.
years away from that. Like we're still working on a lot of automations ourselves, right?
Yeah. No, we are. Jim, it's so interesting because we have so many AI tools that like are already out there, but it doesn't feel like a lot of maybe what we need has been like solved, right? And it feels like we're already, maybe 2.5 years into this and feeling AI fatigue among, not just I would say, myself and I would say almost everyone is everything is AI now, right? So
Yeah.
and we've kind of talked about this earlier, like what about the trap of being a generic or buying even generic AIs that promise to do everything. Why do you think that that's a bad move to be looking at maybe those more generic AI tools as opposed to like a very freight specific tool? But also, if I'm a freight broker right now at the end of 2025 who's starting that evaluation on a new AI tool, what questions should I be asking before I decide to buy one of these? I know I threw a
100%.
lot at you.
I so that really resonates, and like to me, I like it goes back to like being able to draw the diagram. If you're the VP, dispatcher, operations manager, regional GM, president, CEO, COO of a trucking company, broker, carrier, regardless, my first ask for you is to draw your process diagram. Like, what problem are we really trying to solve here? And if you can lay out this process and you're like, you know what, like a simple automation here that like another regular software tool cannot solve this well enough because there's nuance in each of these steps. There's unstructured data. There's like some version of intuition, inference, decision making based off of a policy, more context, etc. Then you are in a position to say like, or sorry, then I think you are in a position to say like, this might be a really good avenue to use an AI product to solve, and like whether build it, buy it, etc. And the reason why I say this is like once you know this, you are able to make a lot more intentional decisions on like what you want to try, and to your point, not get burned by.
Yeah.
Because in turn, like for example, like a lot of like where Rose Rocket's like kind of admin since the technology space is gone has also been because we've seen this on the front grounds, right? Like people have been bringing these kinds of problems to us. People have been asking us, can you do things like connecting between my inbox? Can you do things like all these things? So in turn, like we see this as like real opportunities and avenues where it's like there's really clear input, there's a process diagram here, and like there's a really clear output. I'd say like if as of going from like being a broker, dispatcher, account manager, all the way to being like the CEO of that company, if you can draw that diagram and you can say like, you know what, this is not something like a regular software can solve because there's so much inference, decision making, policy reading, referencing, et cetera, that's required, then there's like a huge opportunity there for like AI to solve. And if you're going down the route, please reach out to me. I would love to hear it. We're always building against this, so it'd be great. But that's like to me like step one. Draw the diagram, draw that process flow.
No, I think that's great because honestly, there's so many tools out there figuring out that process flow, what you need, and then maybe going out and finding the partners who are doing that. Like you said, you can build it, you can buy it. Um, you know, if I'm a smaller broker, if I'm a whatever size broker, I'm probably looking at off the shelf first because it makes the most sense. Someone else has already put that time into it, and just diving into kind of the being burned by AI, right? Something I hear a lot, Jam, is both carriers and brokers are looking for some of those tools, those AI tools that are developed by companies who have been in the industry a long time. And this is, not, little Rose Rocket plug, but I mean, Rose Rocket has been in the industry for a long time. And so when people hear Rose Rocket's AI as opposed to brand new TMS with AI that just launched 5 months ago, um, you guys have kind of that more credibility, and I think that's kind of what, especially with something like this AI tool, and I've heard this a lot with both parties, is what happens if this company goes out of business in a year, or goes out of business in 2 years? What happens to all my data if they just close abruptly and I don't even have an opportunity? We don't want that. People don't want that to happen. They don't want to get burned on 1, 2, 3 years worth of work and spending money just to have something go out of business. So I think it's even for some of these AI companies that are trying to just like waltz into a space to solve something with AI to make a lot of money. I think that those kind of tipping points are over. I think that a lot of VCs and a lot of anyone who wants to invest in it, whether that's bigger freight tech companies or even brokerages, they're being a little bit more intentional as to how they're looking at these tools too, I think.
100%. And like to de-risk those implementations, like to your point, it really is important to figure out like the right partner. And
Yeah.
like I would say like build and buy has never been more important.
Yeah.
What I mean by this is like figure out what are you going to build versus what are you going to buy, and what are you going to build and buy.
Yeah.
Like technology has become very accessible because of the language models. You can have semi-fluent developers build you many things now, and the question is really like how many random tools do I want built off of like the back of a couple of like engineers versus what do I want to consolidate into like a true system of record. And like you can have any level of opinion there, but like I'm saying like it's possible now, so it's really important to go through like a really rigorous build versus build and buy process, and figure out like the right partners in that stack for you. Because like at the same time, like I think there's going to be a ton of players that like, so just like Rose Rocket, our whole thing is like a platform play. We want to enable you building things alongside us and top of us. Like it's just like it just goes back to kind of like figuring out the right thing for you. I also feel like this is like something I personally do. It's like if I'm trying to proof out something that is viable, I actually
Yeah.
just like run through the whole idea with GPT or Claude, and then I ask it to help me kind of like semantically search for alternatives or build something really simple. And then I toy around with that until I get to like, okay, here's what I want to do. I want to produce like I want to read like a new I'm trying to onboard a carrier. I want to automate my carrier onboarding flow. Here's my process. From this process, there's this one document that we have to produce every time. That's like a new agreement, and we have to change like a couple of lines every time because of it. Here's the input. Here's the document output for this previous example. Tell me what I can automate, and they'll come. It'll literally come back at you with like a playbook of like what can be done, and then it could simply be like one ChatGPT bot that's primed with that, and then you just upload a new carrier with like an email blurb every single time, and it'll produce out the new compliance documents. So it's I guess my point being like so much can be built now that the build versus buy decision is actually like way more important now than it's ever been. And you
Yeah.
really have to figure out the right partners in the stack, whether it's like doing it yourself, standing up a lot of these standalone junior tools, I'd say, in your own stack, or like building on top of something else or buying something fully.
Jim, I know we're coming up on time, but I want to ask if someone's listening right now, and I know we're going to have a lot of people who are old school and they want to dive into AI in some form or fashion into their brokerage or into their trucking company. If they're wanting to test AI in their business, what's one place they should start, in your opinion?
100%. I would go talk to one, if you're an operator directly, so you're an account manager, broker, or dispatcher, look at what you do in a week and write down a list.
Hmm.
And then tally beside that list how many times you do it in that week. So, for example, send, check, a call. I do this 100 times a week. Write a report for delivered loads to my CEO. I do this twice a week. You know, once you do that, then right beside like the tally, write in total hours based off like your rough feel there. Whatever's now become the top of this list based off the number of times or the total hours, I'd star that. Once you star that, then go to ChatGPT or Claude and just start describing your workflow to it. Tell it the whole thing they do. What are the inputs, the outputs, and why? Who, what, when, why? Who do I give this to? Who is in this involved in this? What is this about? When do I do this? So daily, monthly, weekly, on 9 a.m.s on 9 a.m.s on Tuesday, etc. Right? Why? Why do I do this? I do this because it produces like I do the check calls because we need to close out all orders in a given. I do the check calls because we need to close out all orders in a given day. If I don't close it out, we lose money, right? We don't get paid. Then it will start transcribing for you the avenue of what can be done.
Mm.
Final question to it should be like, how do I automate this?
Yep.
From there, you will come out with like a whole new set of like potential opportunities. So build a list, tally how many times you do it in a given week. You could even go in a given month if there's like a one monthly big exercise, and then write a rough total numbers based off that tally and like your estimation for each tally, right? That's number of hours multiplied by each time you do it. And then describe the whole thing, who, what, when, why, to GPT with the final thing of like, how do I automate this? Give me a thing to automate this with, and then tell it what tools you use. I use Excel. I use email. I don't have technical literacy. Oh, we use Zapier, et cetera, et cetera. It will find you a path.
I love it.
That's my big recommendation.
No, I love it, Jim. I think that helps. I think it gives everyone out who's listening kind of a clear path to understand a clear kind of a clear strategy to start and kind of get rolling on some of those areas and opportunities. Jim, I really appreciate you coming on the show, talking a little bit about what Rose Rocket is seeing in AI and kind of talking about all the different facets of AI and AI adoption and logistics, because there is so much happening. Jem, if people want to reach out, if they want to talk more directly to you and learn a little bit about AI, or if they've got a couple of questions, how can they reach out to you guys?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna do the whole like and subscribe bit here, but yeah, we're over at www.roserocket.com. You can reach out to me at jamyang .t, so that's jam like JM, like peanut butter and jam jelly type thing, and yang like yin and yang, so YANG, Jamyang dot T period T at roserocket.com. Um, if you ever want to talk about AI, if you're looking to like figure out how to implement it, etc., I'm your guy. Like I did this myself in my own company, built a company in AI, sold that company in AI to Rose Rocket, building the AI stuff at Rose Rocket. I'm your guy.
Awesome. We'll have Jam's contact info in his LinkedIn tagged in our description and on YouTube. And don't forget, we do drop 3 weekly newsletters at thinkfreight.io. We'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thank you guys for listening, and don't forget to think freight.